Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Gunn Show. For those of you who are just visiting, I really appreciate you being here, but also, I guess that means we're starting to get this word out, not just domestically or regionally, but globally, and we welcome you with open arms. And if you are new, let me just quickly touch on what the Gunn Show is about. Well, it is about humanizing a really incredible world of engineering and manufacturing where everyone in this planet has a car or a scooter or a phone or a computer or has even just maybe seen a plane but not on even flown on a plane, whatever it might be. We know that these things exist all around us all the time. However, whether you know it or not, a lot of the people in engineering and manufacturing, if it's not one of the talkers like myself in sales, are pretty humble, introverted type people. So you don't always get their stories. And I personally think it's important to put a face with the products, with the companies, and let you guys know who you're working with and why. Because in my opinion, there are truly some brilliant, humble, kind people in this industry. And that's what it's about. That's what the Gunn Show is about, is humanizing everything that's around us and helping us understand where it comes from and why. So for those of you who are joining us multiple times, thank you for returning. I guess that means I'm not too boring, or I could be incredibly boring, but my guests are absolutely fascinating, and I could definitely agree with that. So for your listening pleasure today, I have the president of North America at Modig Machine Tool, Keith Lopez. This is the Gunn Show. Now, Modig is based in Sweden, and Keith is based in Kansas. So I have the privilege to be in somewhat of the same time zone without one of us being exhausted. So we're both full of energy, full of caffeine, and ready to talk. Keith, thank you so much for being on the Gunn Show. I am ready to hear all about you.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to talk.
Thanks, Keith. So how I like to start this thing is really just learning about you. And you can go as far back as the womb if you want to. I don't remember anything from that time. If you do, you're far more brilliant. But as far back as you want to go, kind of the story of who you are and how you got into manufacturing, whether on purpose or by accident or whatever it might be. I think we all want to hear your story.
Great. Okay. Well, I was born and raised in Wichita, Kansas. Come from a really strong family. Was definitely a soccer player almost from the age of 6 and on. Soccer was my thing, and that's really what I'd say had a huge passion for. So went to school really looking to play soccer, and in the Midwest, soccer wasn't so common, I would say. But what I found out is that, you know, sports and athletics, my parents put me into that, wanting me to stay busy, you know, keep me active. I had a lot of energy, and they wanted to help me get rid of that. I think I always accused my mom of keeping me on a heavy dose of sleep deprivation, because if I got too much rest, then I think I was a handful. But no, I did. I enjoyed my childhood, played a lot of sports and athletics. I had a younger brother and a sister that were both, my brother was very athletic. My sister was very instrumentally gifted. So we were diverse and had a great childhood. Played all the way through college. So played on a college scholarship. And really, for me, you know, I found the competitive nature, the physical challenge, and the mental toughness that was required. And it definitely formed me over the years.
Well, we may not even get to the Modig conversation today and how incredible your machines are, because I love soccer too. And I grew up playing soccer, and I also played at a high level in college, and we'll call it pro, but I really just wasn't good enough. But we could talk about that all day probably. And you're right. When we're kids and we're running around the house like mad men and women, our parents are like, well, what sport do they run the most? Let's put them in soccer so they will go to bed at a decent hour. So congratulations to you. Where did you go to college and play?
I played at Fringe University, so it was more of a local Christian college. We played in the Midwest, so Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri. But it was a great experience. And like I said, some of my best friends come from those days.
What position did you play?
Center mid.
The whole time throughout?
Yeah.
When you
I
were
played
young,
goalie as a
through?
kid. My dad and I were just talking about the other day, because he said that you know, he wanted to put me in goal because that was the best position he thought for me, and He just told me the other day, he said, your mom used to tell me the night before the games, hey, Keith doesn't want to be a goalie all the time. So
So I have to ask you, if all through college and starting as a goalie, how tall are you?
6'3".
So you don't feel like a midget, like a small person like I do when I go to Sweden. When you go to Sweden, where Modig is based, you fit right in, whereas I'm looking up at everybody.
Yeah, I definitely fit in. David and I are kind of funny. We're the same size.
Well, I hear he's coming to the US soon. I really look forward to meeting David in person. I've seen him on video a lot. So you went into college, and what was your degree? Was your degree in I'm awesome and I know how to talk to people, so I'm just going to be the president of one of the best machine companies on the planet? Or what were the plans?
No, so I went to business, and I was really wanting to be an entrepreneur. My passion was finding that new company that was going to be the upstart growing company. And then soon realized, that's not a very common job that you're going to find out of college. So of all things that is really unique, I went into the dialysis center. I worked with the dialysis company here in town and was their business manager. And that was my step out of college.
Wow. Can you talk a little bit about that experience? That sounds intriguing.
Yeah, it was very interesting. It wasn't, that's not definitely the plan when you leave school, but I was their procurement manager. So I bought all the supplies, and it was kind of funny because when you transition from that to the next job, it's like, well, where I just came from, if we didn't do our job, really bad things happen to people. So the stress was a little higher there than it was in the other sectors.
So being the president of North American Modig is less stressful than working in dialysis right out of college. Is that what you're telling me?
It was, yeah, that was a pretty big step to go from school to that. That's for sure.
So you seem to have quite a lot of, I think intelligence is the right word, but I'm gonna go quite a lot of experience and wisdom. And you've seen a lot, you've done a lot, and from what I understand, you had a really strong career in aerospace for a while. Is that correct?
That is correct. I was originally hired by Boeing. So I worked at the Boeing factory in Wichita, which then later divested and became Spirit Aerosystems. I was there for 20 years.
What did you learn from that experience? 20 years is a long time. And in the world of aerospace, there's been massive development. I mean, not in 24 hours, nevertheless, 20 years.
Right. I learned a lot there. One, I learned the strength of people. I learned that all around the globe, people really work hard to succeed, and they make the best with what it is that they have. And you meet some pretty amazing minds and some pretty amazing people as you travel and you go see factories around the world.
That statement resonates with me because I didn't have the pleasure, just because we can call me whatever adjective we want to use, but I didn't graduate. I didn't graduate college, couldn't sit in a room, but I did work really hard my life. And I feel like the best and most experienced I ever became was when I started traveling and learning from others and the wisdom that they were able to pass on. Was it similar for you in that sense?
Very much. I think we have a little bit of a stigma sometimes in the Midwest where we don't think that, we measure up when you think of the bigger companies overseas. But what you find out is everywhere people are doing amazing things at different levels. And when I started traveling, it really magnified my learning curve, both when I was on the road and at home.
So when you say travel, did you have the opportunity to go a lot of countries around the world and understand global business, or was it just domestically and you got to visit a lot of companies domestically?
No, definitely have traveled internationally, and what more centric towards the manufacturing piece of aerospace at the time. So when I was going to visit people, it was to see how they were making parts or to inspect their business to see how they were going to make our parts. But definitely from that perspective, the one thing that was always unique to me is even though we all face the same challenges, we don't realize it. So the problems we were having here in Wichita, I would find when I went to Canada or when I, went to other places. And that's when I started to understand if you have a common success, you need to share it because other people are struggling with the same situation.
I agree. And I am one of those types of people that love manufacturing. Sounds like you do too. But I'm also a massive fan of the people in general and humanizing the people. So when you talk about those issues that people are having in shops, also with personalities in life, and when we open up to each other and go, man, I had a shit day, and you go, yeah, mine was too. You know, we start connecting on that level as well, right? It's machining is there and it's always there, but when someone decides to open up, because, and I've said this joke before, so please forgive me if for all the listeners out there, it might be the first for you, but for the listeners out there, how can you tell when there's an outgoing engineer versus a stereotypical engineer? It's when they look at your feet when you talk to them versus their own feet. Because typically they're just so smart thinking, introverted. And, you know, unless you put a shot of tequila or something in front of them, they're going to stay that way, right? So the moment that we can choose to open up and remove those barriers and connect with people as a whole, we find so many commonalities, which then expand into the manufacturing world as well.
Right. No, I agree. And so, you know, when you look back even just 10 years in your life and you think about what you remember are the people that you've met and the things that you've done together, a lot more than you're going to remember a specific event with one machine or one manufacturing process. It's the people.
It's almost always the people, but the one thing that also stands out with me is the times I've really smashed a machine. I'm gotta be honest. When I've made some bad programming choices and I had a tool come flying through the plexiglass, that scared the living you know what out of me. And that's almost equally as significant in my life as the brilliant people that I was surrounded by at that time as well.
Yeah, that'll wake you up real quick.
I had to change my diaper. So speaking of 20 years in the aerospace, you then transitioned over to Modig, and Modig is a family-owned company, and Modig is also a leader, especially in the aerospace world, about what it can accomplish and the unique capabilities of the machines themselves. So what I'd like to talk about was the transition from working at one company for 20 years to moving into machine sales. Was that part easy? And then also, did you understand the aerospace industry so well that when you saw Modig, you just knew that you could help people based on the unique family-based style that they have there?
You know, it's interesting because I had the unique opportunity to be a customer of Modig before I worked for Modig. So, you know, I actually was a part of a team that was buying equipment from them. I was using their machines when I was in fabrication. And so I was able to experience firsthand the advantage that we had by using that equipment. But, you know, making the transition it was difficult at first. And there were a lot of people, you wouldn't believe how many people said, you've got to be crazy. That is too big of a leap. You know, you're going from an ops director to, yeah, you're responsible for sales. But in my heart, I knew it was the right thing. I really did. I just had a passion for it. And I felt like there was so much opportunity for Modig and what they were bringing to the table that there weren't enough people that knew who they were and what they did.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And to be fair, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm wrong fairly often, and I love being corrected because that's how I learn. But Modig is, I believe, the only real machine manufacturer in Sweden. Is that correct?
That is true. I think they are the last Scandinavian true CNC machine OEM company.
And with that being the case, the awareness and being in that part of the world and where Sweden is listed on the global scale of manufacturing, regardless of how powerful these machines can be for people, if they don't know about them, then they don't know about the success they can create, right? So it's people like you, I believe, going back to soccer and taking on these challenges, it looks at something like this and goes, I've been working in this industry for 20 years. I see what's happening from this company, and I know I can help, regardless of all you people thinking I'm crazy. I know I can help. Was it kind of like that?
It is, you know, and I'll tell you a funny story. You know, David might be a little shocked I'd tell you this, but it was so funny because he called me and said, Keith, you know, we became friends over the years. And when he came to Wichita, we'd go to have dinner. But he called me and he said, hey, Keith, I really think you should come to work for us. And I was like, no, David, no, I'm good, man. And he was persistent and he came back several times. And, you know, I listened to what he was telling me, and I was blown away because I had seen what they could do. And so when he told me about their new machine, I was like, I went home that night. I said, I think I'm going to make a change, like a huge change, I remember the look on my boss's face when I told him. I said, I think my days here are done and I'm going to turn in my notice. And he was blown away. He couldn't believe it, especially when he found out you're going to do machine tools.
For
So,
20 years, I can only imagine what he was thinking. And if you were the director of the operations and you go into sales, not everyone has that personality type to start with. We're right-brained and left-brained, and some people speak and some people don't. And to me, that's a courageous step as well. Did you feel like sales, were you always natural at sales, or were you one of the people, including myself, who as a machinist kind of cringed when someone was like sales? I'm like, ooh, sales. I'm not ready for that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would say it's fair to say I probably ran from salesman and never thought I'd be a salesman. That's for sure. And,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things David and I are kind of funny because we both tell people neither one of us are really salesmen. So,
but you're good people. And really what we need and what we have a lot of in our industry is good people. And I've met quote unquote salesmen, and a lot of quote unquote salesmen, they have a lot of smoke that's coming out, right? But
right.
when you meet a good person that comes from a background like yourself, we know you've been through it. You've been through the ringer. You've seen the failures. You've been a part of the situation. And there's a reason why you can articulate yourself and connect with other engineers, is because you've done that. It's not just, hey, trust me, I'm going to make you the best ever. And you just have to believe it. It doesn't work like that, right? You can prove it and share it. And I see that in you.
It's funny that you hit on that, because that is so true. One of the things I've told people before, after you've been through enough forest fires or you've been through enough battles and you're that battle hardened, it's easy to pick that up in other people. They don't get as upset over the trivial things. They also understand the reality of a large scale project is going to have large scale potential problems. And you just learn how to work through it. And the only way to do that is through good people making it happen.
I agree. And you mentioned large scale. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the machines themselves now, if that's okay with you, because
Sure.
again, this podcast is about humanizing, but also we're educating. Let's learn about the people, but let's also do some education. When I see some of these machines that come out of Modig, I see they look upside down. They are feeding rectangular bar through. I'm used to seeing round bar. I mean, some of the products are just so out of the box thinking, but they're reducing cycle times by dramatic or drastic amounts. I mean, we're talking really, really competitive machinery out there. But then Modig will go, well, take a look at this, and we would just reduce 70% of your cycle time based on these unique and unusual methods of doing the machining. Could you describe some of these machines and how they actually work?
Sure. I think, obviously the mainstay of who we are, if people are at the airport and they see me and they'll go, hey, we know who you guys are. You do, the bar and extrusion work. And I think for a long time that was Modig's brand. That's who we were. And to be honest, I would put us in the top tier of that echelon when it comes to performance, ingenuity. The lean process that the HHV brings to a manufacturing cell is tremendous. And when David brought out the Rigimill, I mean, that was a machine. That's the machine that brought me to his company. When he really sat me down and I listened to him for an hour and a half, the impact that I knew that would have on global manufacturing, I was like, okay, I'm in. I want to be a part of this and I'll help you, because I don't know of another machine right now, especially when you think about how advanced all the technology is globally, that you can look at a major aircraft component and there's a specific case where David said, I will cut that cycle time in half. And they were like, that's impossible. We're really good. Well, then we did it 56% better. And I mean, wow. it was, no one could believe it. It's amazing.
I like David. I like David for many reasons. I mean, I obviously will have a conversation with you and I value you as well and respect you as well. But you bring up David a couple of times. And I think that's important to understand, because this is a family-owned company. It is out of Sweden. And to be fair, on a global scale, it's not going to be the largest one in the world, but you guys support the world. And what I like about David is he is one of those outside of the box thinkers that wants to try something new, that is also technically savvy enough to realize when something's going to be a foolish decision and when something's really going to work. And knowing that it really works, now we have to convey that message to the audience, because how many of us are so stubborn and we go, well, I've always done it this way. And I read a quote the other day from my buddy Chris. I believe it was my buddy Chris, and it was it said, if you've been in the industry for 20 years but you haven't learned anything in 15, then you only have 5 years of experience. And
True.
that resonated. We have to pay attention to the new, latest, greatest. Does that mean we might have to leave our comfort zone for a minute? Absolutely. But when that success gets there, that success gets repeated and grows. I think that's something Modig does in an amazing way.
I would agree with you. You know, it's very interesting because David and I probably talk 8-9 times a day, just to be realistic. We talk all times of the day. We're both so passionate about this. I would say that the fire is strong. And when I say that, what I mean is we've looked at each other and said, this may not work, but we've got to try it. And because his company has always been on the, as it sounds corny, but he's been on the cutting edge for so long of trying to find what is that next shift in performance. And sometimes it doesn't work. But what we have learned is when it does work, you really change you set a new baseline.
Yeah, I agree. And I actually have 3 questions that I'm going to go into here, but they all go into the same thing. So I'd like for you to explain it. The first thing is the EV market. I'd like you to discuss to our global audience who might not know what the EV audience is. So first, just break down what the EV is, what the EV market is, right? So once we break that down, then Modig seems well positioned to shift into that market. And do you or do you not think that's true? And then I'll move on to my third question.
Okay. So the electrical vehicle market is interesting because, you know, I am an aerospace guy, so I am by no means the automotive expert. But what we have seen is there is a very rapid, dynamic shift taking place in the automotive industry as we transition from the gas-powered engine to electrical vehicles, and the design continues to improve for safety. You know, that car, the new cars just happen to be made out of a lot of aluminum extrusion. And David and I have said this for so many years. We go and you talk and you try and meet people and you look for who may need your machine, but we've never had an industry just turn and point at Modig and say, that's the machine for our industry. So when I joined Modig, David and I had deep talks about diversifying the company because we were so aerospace centric. And so this has really played into years of us talking to people that this EV market, the HHV, is a great solution. It allows them to have such a lean process.
Yeah, I see that being the case as well. It's the automotive industry, only from the outside looking in, because while I do work with great companies like yourself and I get to learn from valuable insight coming from people like yourself, I mean, I've been into Chrysler one time and my mind was blown. You know, I've been into a couple other automotive places. I mean, the Chrysler building, I think at one time, I think it had to reduce over time, but at one time was 30,000 people. It looks like a small city. The giant clay molds that they're making the cars out of are, you know, really interesting. So getting into this market, knowing that you guys are so significant in aerospace, where do you think Modig sits in this arena with some of the other machine companies out there who have been doing automotive, whether it be the old school version versus the transition of what we're doing going into EV? Where do you guys get in there and really explore and create success for these companies?
So I think, you know, there's a couple pieces that I would answer that with. One, because we are a small family owned business, and we are fighting against what we would say are the larger companies that make great products, we can be nimble. So our flexibility is powerful. We have the ability, if someone says, oh, well, no, I need this. Okay, well, that's simple enough. That can be on the next serial number in 4 months. You know, that's not a common response factor you would get from a bigger company. So that's powerful. I would say the level of dedication that you get from a smaller company is also intense, because we're so focused on success, we can't allow there to be failure. So there's the constant pressure of the whole team is moving towards a common goal of success. And whatever that is, it's for that specific customer.
I like that you brought that up. And I'll tell you why, Keith, is because while there is great value in working with massive companies, I find, and I don't know that I'm supposed to say more so, but I'm going to say it anyway. I find it more so likable for a person like myself to work with a smaller company just based on what you said. We have to make a change. You know what? We can do that for you because we don't have to go through the hierarchy of 1,000 people to make that happen. Well, that's fantastic. How quickly can you have it done? Well, based on our size and what we're doing, we can get that done for you quickly. These are some of the attributes that you're talking about, right? Because there are going to be a lot of situations that are going to be specials, as we call them, in quotes. These are specials. And almost every company you go into goes, well, I can't buy it off the shelf. I'm going to need this change, and this change. And you guys are able to adapt to that quickly.
That is correct. So, it's funny you say that, because I do believe this. I want everyone to be successful. You and I talked about this before the show started. I love everyone's place in the global market. I do see our strength is not saying you can have what's on page 12 or 13. Which one do you like? You want red or blue, right? It's not like that for us. It's really about me understanding your problem. And I think David and I make a pretty dangerous duo, because with my manufacturing eye and his engineering mind, we come up with some pretty creative solutions that are really driven towards that specific customer having success.
Well, you mentioned red or blue, and the first thing that popped into my head was the Matrix. And if I was in that Matrix, I'd grab both pills and ate them both. That's just how that's sorry guys, I want it all. I'm gonna eat all the pills. But to go back into it, we know, most of us know, and those who listen that don't know, Modig is superior product in the aerospace world and has been for a while. I mean, you walk into a lot of these, as you mentioned, the Boeings that you worked at before ever being the president of the U.S. market. And now we're talking about automotive and moving into the EV world, right? But where else do you see Modig being just, really a successful product for some of these other companies and industries?
So one of the other industries that we're seeing is, and unfortunately I can't give too much detail, but we are potentially on the cusp of a very significant firearms arrangement. Because of our lean processes, we are going to really change the competitive nature for a specific arena in a military gun environment. So that's exciting for us. Another sector that we see is interesting is, a lot of the construction that we're starting to see now, even commercially, is also starting to move towards a different level of extrusion in some situations. So I also see Modig starting to play in that. And then the last sector, without a doubt, that David and I have kind of found is a real target for us, is the energy sector. So when you look at semiconductors and those kinds of larger scale machining, not the small pieces, it's quite interesting to see what our run times look like right now compared to what the industry accepts as the standard.
So based on that, how do we get that awareness out? Do we just create 1,000 comparison videos going, well, this is what they used to do, and this, because people hold their cards so close to their chest, right? And you walk into a building right now, and I know you've done this, so I'll actually use the word promise. I promise you've walked into a building before and you walked out being able to go, I can't tell anybody anything about what I just saw.
Yeah. No, so it's right. We walk a fine line, and that's one of the reasons we decided to put our North American headquarters. It'll be the first time we've got U.S. soil Modig property in about a month. And what we're going to have there is really a showcase facility with some of our machines. This will allow us to do those things that other people don't believe we can do. So then I'll be able to demonstrate to them that I really can do what we said we can do. So that'll be powerful for us. But yeah, it is difficult when you see opportunity and it's hard to share what that should be.
Yeah, I've found that. I mean, I've had the ability to go into companies where I can create a success story, and I'm sure you have as well. because there's no proprietary rights. But at the same time, 50% of our industry, just we can't share it. And a lot of times this is where some of the most significant secrets are happening.
Right.
And how much could the world learn if we were able to share it? And I get why there's secrets, don't get me wrong, but I mean, you're in there a lot, right? And these success stories are real. This jump from 70% more time savings, 56% more time savings, it's not made up. These are actual numbers done by engineers where it happens. So I am so excited to be a part of your opening, I believe in Wichita, Kansas, in late October. If you want to give an exact date, you're welcome to. But I believe it's late October, around about the same time as East Tech. And I think David's going to fly over from Sweden to be a part of it as well. So I'm so excited for you guys.
Well, we're very excited. It's been several years in the making. We think we've got a very beautiful location, and it's going to be unique. It's going to be very Swedish in nature in the sense of how we handle customers and the purpose behind it. But then it's also going to have a very strong American manufacturing feel to it. So it's a beautiful blend of both, and we're very excited about it.
So why Wichita? Is it because it's the central location for maybe shipping parts to all parts of the country and getting that? Or is it because that's where you live and they like you so much, they go, you know what, Keith, wherever you go, that's where the headquarters will be?
You know, it's funny because there's been some people, I think, that when we talk about it, they get it. But, you know, Wichita really for the longest time was known as the aerospace capital of the world. You know, we had so many different airplane configurations that were really built right here. So there's a strong machining appreciation and knowledge in this territory. And, you know, our largest customer in the world is Spirit Aerosystems. And so it's nice to be able to support all of that here locally. And we are in the center of the United States. And so it makes having customers come in a nice central location.
When you say, this has nothing to do with Modig, I don't think, but it might if we're clever enough to figure out how to segue into it. When you say Spirit, is that the same Spirit Airlines that I fly from time? It's not.
No,
What is
no,
what
no,
is
no.
that?
So Spirit Aerosystems is Boeing Wichita. It divested
Okay.
in 2005, and the Boeing facility became its own entity.
Well, we've kind of touched on this already. Having this building in the US instead of just videos, you know, because videos can only convey but so much. And don't let me downplay those, because I create videos for everyone all over the world all the time. And I want people to know how powerful they are. But to be fair, once somebody has watched that video, they also want to touch it. They also want to see. They want to put you through the ringer, that when you say, I can reduce this cycle time and let me show you how, they want you to do it and show them and bring them into your facility. Is that where you see this facility in Wichita really benefiting your customer, your national domestic base customer base?
Yes. So, you know, it's become increasingly difficult with time constraints. People aren't as free to just go to Sweden for a week, you know, by the time you leave and you go there and you come back. So I know time constraints is one thing. The real beauty too of having this facility in the States is just being able to, like you said, people want to kick the tires. And so they want to see the construction. Our machines they're all cast iron. They're strong machines. And so a lot of times when people see them, it's a different perspective when you're standing there looking at these machines and you understand how they're made.
Yeah. I have not had that opportunity yet, but I definitely tell you what, I've watched a lot of your videos. And when we won't go into detail, but when you were talking about the gun thing just now, the first thing that popped into my head was that super cool machine you guys have that feed rectangular bars. So it's like me having stock all the time ready to go in rectangular shapes instead of just circular shapes. First thing that pops in my head is, ooh, I know how some of these gun parts are made. I can see this being like a lights out 24/7 type of operation that needs almost zero maintenance, just so long as we get the chips out of the way, with your machine sometimes being flipped upside down, so the chips are almost always out of the way. So you're playing that game too. It's really exciting for me to talk about your products.
Yeah, no, it's so funny. I love talking to someone that sees what the potential is, because you're exactly right. And for the people who, you know, we were at SHOT Show a couple years ago and we'd never been there before. And we had this little booth with a TV, and, you know, I would stand there and nobody would talk to me because they didn't know who we were. And then somebody watched the video and they're like, whoa, oh my God, I've never seen that, so getting that reaction, I live for that. That's the best.
That was my very first, when I first talked to David months and months ago, that was my very first reaction when he showed me the video of the machine we were just talking about, because in my head, I go, my whole life, I've been calling someone like Alro, the metal company, and I have them go, okay, well, I need a 7x12x4, and can you please cut 1,000 of these pieces? Well, now just send me the whole freaking sheet. I'll pop it into my Modig and we just run with minimal scrap and downtime. That sounds great.
Right. Yeah. And you brought up the inverted machine. That's another one that's just, you talk about a unique approach. And, when you machine hard metal, we all worry about recutting chips. Well, there aren't going to be any to recut. Gravity is going to help us out with that. So very, very creative.
Yeah. For a lack of better term, I'm going to use the word trippy. When I first saw that video of my spindle on the bottom and my part at the top and the way it was inverted, it kind of tripped me out a little bit. I was like, wait, what are we doing here? Is this going to work? And then I just kept watching. I was like, it is going to work. And not only is it going to work, it might change the way other machine companies start making their machines in the future whenever that patent runs out, because I'm sure there's a patent.
There is a patent, and I actually have it sitting right here on my desk. So yeah, it's a beautiful design, and that's just another good example of not limiting creativity, right? We've all had that boss where you have a great idea and immediately, no, we don't do it like that here. We do it like this. Well, if you stifle that creativity, eventually you start to limit the potential of your company, your people. And that is not the case at Modig. We encourage it. So it's a very different environment.
Well, I'm going to make a stereotype that might be completely wrong based on my limited understanding. But here in Florida, I don't think I have a different style of creativity, but we're always on the beach and it's always warm and we're always on vacation. And I've been to places where there's the white nights and the nights where there's really no day. I would imagine if I'm a machine guy like David and it's, 8 months of darkness, what else am I going to do but create really awesome machinery, right? So this is, to me, the reason why some of this excellent work comes out of the Scandinavian countries.
Yeah, maybe you uncovered some of his sickness. I never thought about it that way. So
well, I've been to Iceland when there is no darkness, and I've been to Iceland when there's pretty much only darkness. And I've been to St. Petersburg, Russia, similar thing. I've not been to Sweden yet, but they all lie in that same area. So for me to try to understand where all this creativity comes from, I kind of just make things up, and whether it's real or not, that's where I'm getting it from. I'm on the beach with a margarita while he's creating new machines. You know what I mean?
Right. No, you're exactly right. Yeah, I wonder sometimes, when does he sleep?
So you've been with Modig for 5 years. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And how would you describe the growth and the trajectory of the company moving forward?
So we've been very fortunate. We've had good success. The growth, we have a new beautiful factory in Kalmar, Sweden, that really is the result of a lot of hard work, and the establishment here in Wichita is just another piece of success. But when I look at the trajectory of the company, we all see a tremendous amount of potential. Last year I think was an eye opener for everyone in the world to see how things slowed down. But we were fortunate because we had diversified and we were working various sectors of business. I think we are looking right now, when we really understand where we sit today and where we see ourselves in 5 years, there's a significant amount of growth for Modig as our notoriety starts to spread and as we move into other industries first, most certainly.
Yeah, we touched on that kind of throughout the entire podcast based on, aerospace and automotive and these types of things. But yeah, I foresee a lot of really great things coming out of it. And when having someone like you only 5 years in and knowing what you can create and the history and the wisdom and the technical know-how, it's only good things. As I close this out, there's something I like to do. And the people who listen to this podcast all the time know what I'm about to say, and also know that I'm going to make this a bit long-winded because none of our stuff is scripted. So it gives you time to think about the answer that you want to give.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it's not difficult. I'm not going to put you under too much pressure. It's a simple thing, but with you having the experience and the wisdom that you have, and with the audience valuing the information that you shared with them today, I always like to take a moment to close this out and just ask you for a piece of advice. And that advice can be for anyone. It can be in the industry, out of the industry. It can be a personal thing. It can be oftentimes we talk about people who are interested to get into manufacturing, or the ones trying to excel from the position they're in currently, or someone who has now been in the industry so long that they've started to become stagnant and jaded and find things to be monotonous. And how can we inspire them? You get to choose whatever story that you want for whatever people you want. It's just it could be a quote, it could be a story, but whatever you'd like to share is a piece of wisdom of where you come from and how your life has been up until now that you'd like to share with our global audience.
Wow. Okay. So you hit on something that I'm passionate about with people. I mentored a lot of people when I was at Boeing and Spirit. I came from a low to middle income family that, I watched how hard my father worked. And I'll tell everyone that is listening this, everyone truly holds the key and the ability to steer their life where they want it to go. And most of the time, if people really would be honest with themselves, they limit what their potential is. It's not other people. And I think for me, for the guy who's sitting out there thinking, okay, I'm 35, I guess I'm stuck in this specific spot until I'm 55, you're wrong. That you have to have the passion, the fire, and the willingness to do what it takes to grow and to change, and to find other like-minded people like yourself that will encourage you to succeed.
I love it, Keith. I appreciate you sharing that last piece of information. You, my friend, have been an absolute joy on the show. For everyone listening, thank you for paying attention to what we have to talk about. We do value you listening as much as we value the words that come out of our mouth. Now, that's obviously a joke. We value the listeners so much, because without you, we're really just talking to each other, which is always fun. But I'd rather have a beer and sit down with Keith. So thank you all for listening. This is the Gunn Show. This is where we want to humanize the industry, to have respect for one another, to value all of the different symbiotic relationships throughout the world that matter to each other. Let's again be grateful for all the people who are making medical instruments for our doctors, making the components for planes so that we can fly, and cars that we can drive, and phones that we can play on. Everything that's in our daily lives, let's honor one another. Let's respect one another. Keith, president of North America at Modig Machine Tool, at one of the coolest university graduates called Friends, I highly respect you, and thank you so much for being a part of the Gunn Show.
Thank you so much for having me today. It's been a joy.